So my 18-year-old son killed himself and died on May 1st of this year. And we were pretty shocked to find out that he'd actually told a number of people what he was planning. And so we actually found out that 80% of those who commit suicide tell someone what they're going to do. And we decided that that needed to change because young people aren't trained on what to do. So we want to empower the youth to tell someone. It's not an us and them when it comes to suicide and suicidal ideation. We want to empower them and also give them a way to communicate with administration of the schools if they don't feel comfortable going in personally, to do it anonymously.
Depression and suicide in our society carries such a strong stigma with it, and it's a two-way stigma. You have those that feel depressed or suicidal, that it's such a personal thing that your first instinct isn't to talk about it because it is so personal. And then on the other end of that, people that you feel might be able to help or who could provide resources in the future, it's hard to hear at the same time. And with the stigma, it's not as if we're very well equipped on how to handle that. And so with this organization, our target audience is teenagers, and just to educate them on resources, but then also to give them the means to tell somebody while still maintaining that personal feeling. By using this, it allows them to get that information across in an anonymous way. So then that stigma that is so often associated with it isn't something that's in the forefront.
We want to reframe the thinking of the youth because change always comes typically with youth because us older people are set in our ways. To reframe the thinking, the pastor that handled my son's funeral was fabulous. Sergeant Higgins with the National Guard. He said, "Can you talk your friend out of having diabetes? Can you talk your friend out of having epilepsy? Then what makes you think you can talk your friend out of having a chemical imbalance in your brain?" I actually was middle of South Dakota a couple weekends ago having a conversation with a gentleman and just happened to be there. And he asked about the sign on my car, B, and I explained to him that my son had committed suicide. And this grown man says to a grieving mother, "I just think that's the weakest way you can go." I was floored and wanted to physically hurt him. But I didn't, and I thought, this is what we're battling. This is exactly why we need to reframe the thinking, because here, and I said the same thing to him. I said, "Could you talk your friend out of having epilepsy?" And he said, "No, but that's a medical condition." So is depression. It is a chemical imbalance in your brain. And if many adults feel that way, then the youth of our society can actually help to train them that this is a medical condition that needs treatment, not friends trying to talk them out of it. And you don't want to tell on them. Exactly. You don't want to betray them. So that's actually what B is founded by, because I'm not mad at the people that he told that didn't tell. They didn't have the training. So we need schools to contact us so that we can train the kids on what to do. There's a presentation so that they can relate to Ian and see that he wasn't any different. He was not the kid wearing black in the corner. He was outgoing and funny and a member of the South Dakota National Guard and a member of the Brookings High School band, and he had lots of friends, and this affected a lot of people. And so, a lot of kids can relate to him. And then we want to tell them, tell someone, or tell someone. And then I also want to provide resources, because in this whole thing, the National Guard actually provided me with some of the resources available, like the South Dakota Helpline. I had no idea it existed. I didn't know that. So if I provide all of the resources that are available in each community, then if it comes to be where they need those resources, then they'll at least know where to look, or they'll at least know what's in their community. And then the other thing is we're going to leave each school with a way to take a survey, because I think it's really easy for people in general to say, oh, that's them. Well, South Dakota has suicide is the leading cause of death in 15 to 24-year-olds in South Dakota. So a lot of times when I say that to people, they go, well, that's because of over there. I think it's really important that each school see just how many of their students admit to being suicidal or having been suicidal, and how many students are saying, no, we've heard people talking about suicide, because then it becomes oh, this is our problem too. Because then if they need follow-up care, if they need, the school counselors to set up something, then they are aware of the problem.
So with this organization, the goal is to get into schools and to do a presentation to a large student body. And this rat card essentially sums up what that presentation will be. It's a 4-pronged approach that Teressa came up with. And the first is to relate. Again, as she said earlier, Ian was going places, and it was a shock to everyone that this happened. And his story, we agree and have heard from other people as well that his story is incredibly relatable. And it was so shocking because, again, with that stigma of when you picture someone who's depressed or suicidal, in my personal opinion, he was the opposite of that. And so even having that picture in your head, that's kind of where we can understand that the base is cracked, that we need to build up from something stronger than that. And so the first prong is essentially to relate. And so it'll be talking about Ian, talking about his story, and ultimately summing up that he committed suicide. And going into that, not only did he commit suicide, but there were a couple of his friends that were aware that he was feeling that way, that he was holding on to those really dark feelings. And no one was told. Teachers, counselors, Teressa, his brother, any adult figure that might have been able to step in and say, all right, we need to get you some help. That information was out there and it just didn't get to the right people. And again, not to, post blame or give them any of the responsibility. It's just, again, there's this personal thing about it. It's knowing Ian, for him to be personal, it was just a very complicated situation, and it's really sad that it resulted in this way. But again, that's kind of where we want to go in, and we want to rebuild from that and re-strengthen that. And so the second prong is just tell somebody, tell your parents, tell a counselor, tell the principal, tell somebody. And we go into that knowing full well that, again, because this is such a personal topic, and it's so hard, again, that two-way street of it's not only hard for a person to admit that they're feeling this way, but it's hard for the person listening to know what to do with that information. We want to introduce the beehive, is what its name is, which will be placed maybe outside of a front office, somewhere where a student, if they are feeling suicidal, or they hear a friend is suicidal, or they hear someone in the cafeteria saying, I'm having these feelings, where they can essentially write down their name, heard they were talking about this, or here they might be depressed. And what will happen is the principal or the counselor will then, check the box on a daily basis. And if it turns out that someone's name is in the box, they'll notify their parents and say, we're not entirely sure what this exactly means, but someone has placed so-and-so's name in the box. So we just wanted to pass this information along to you, because had that been done in this situation, Teressa would have done something about it. And so the box also provides a way for it to be anonymous. So while we say, if you hear someone is feeling this way, tell a principal, tell a counselor, we understand that that's hard in itself. And that is a lot of pressure, and that can be a huge burden. And so we want to give them this method, this system that allows them to kind of take that burden off their shoulders without having to take it on, be that individual that did it. And so then from introducing that, we'll go into resources that are available in that community and discuss resources throughout the state, different ways that, you might be able to get help. And then again, the fourth prong is to reestablish, go back into this, and then discuss how it's going to be executed within the school. So again, it starts off with Ian's story, relates to the student body, talk about how had someone told an authority figure or someone who could have done something to help, that this outcome might not have happened. Again, the biggest thing is that suicide is preventable. It's completely preventable.
It is a disease, but it's still preventable.
And resources that would offer help that might be able, again, to prevent these outcomes, and then the beehive, how this system will be executed, and the importance that it would have in making a change in this system.
Well, I would also like to say that a number of people thought that Ian wasn't serious, that he had mentioned it so many times that they just thought that it was just him seeking attention or trying to fit in, because there seems to be this you're kind of cool if you're depressed kind of attitude a little bit. And part of the tell is to let them know, empower these kids to be the ones to save lives, but also to say it's not your job to determine who's serious and who isn't. If it's mentioned, it's not okay, and it needs to be brought to the forefront. It needs to be told. Ian actually did tell his girlfriend that because she said, no, this isn't funny, I'm going to tell your mom. And he's like, if you do that, I won't talk to you. And of course, she thought that she could talk him out of it. And I completely understand that at that age. You think that you can. They don't understand that it's a medical condition. Adults don't know that. Adults don't understand that completely. So change begins with the youth.
A person with a healthy mind would not contemplate taking their own life. That's not a healthy thought. And whether that spawns from depression or other issues or whatnot, that's something that needs to be addressed. And so
it doesn't matter if they're seeking attention. Yeah. They still need help, because you just don't say that. And a number of people said, well, people will just put somebody else's name in here, as a form of bullying or something. I want to not only empower kids, but to teach them just how serious it is, and that the schools are trusting them to not only save lives, but to treat the beehive with respect. So.
And truthfully, even if out of one, every 10 names was serious, that's one name that might not have been brought up in the past, and we're not oblivious to teenagers and what they might think is funny, or what but that's not a reason to not do this, and that's not a reason, in my opinion, to not have it. Again, even if it's 1 out of 10 names where that person needs help, or those parents are able to get through and figure out a solution, then that's good enough for me.
Yeah. I've had a lot of comments from people, because I've been very open from the very beginning on how my son died. And people have commented that has opened their eyes, that's actually educating some of the people around us. So the more people we educate, the more we change that mindset that this is a choice, because he held on for a long time and he waited for things to get better. But the chemicals in his brain wouldn't let him see things could get better.
And he had long-term plans, which again kind of filters into how shocking it was. He was going to go to South Dakota State. He was incredibly excited for his next leg and being in the National Guard this summer. He had plans. And then this happened.
They can certainly contact our website. We have our website up and running. It is be-a-lifesaver.org. be-a-lifesaver.org. You can contact me there. You can contact me at 605-695-6323 to schedule me to come to your schools and educate your kids. There's been a huge support in the community for our program. As soon as people hear about it, they get excited about it, and they want to see me in the schools. So contact your local schools and have them contact me to come into the school and educate. I mean, that's what we need right now, and we need funding. Funding is always good. So we've had a number of supporters. Brian Hildebrandt, CPA here in Brookings, is our going to be the foundation, or this organization's accountant, and he's working on getting us the 501c3 status. Senator Thune's office is aware of what we're doing and is in support and writing letters of support, and we'll be doing that. The director of counseling at SDSU is writing letters of support. We've just had a huge, the National Guard is actually dispersing our RAC card here to all South Dakota schools that they come in contact with, you know, to help us get out there. So we've just had a huge support.
You know, I would say, you know, experiencing the death of a loved one is hard. Experiencing the death of a loved one that was a result of suicide is not only hard, but you're left with so many questions. And, you know, I speak personally, I feel you become hypersensitive to it. And the amount of times, whether it be in television shows or magazine articles or comments on the internet, jokes, suicide, the way that we do discuss it and the way we do talk about it as a society, I feel, is counteractive. And so that is a huge umbrella subject. And we understand that, you know, we're only a couple people trying to make a difference. And so if we're going to try to take a whack at changing how suicide is viewed, changing how depression is viewed, this is a good step. Is changing the perspective.
I'm still going.
And with this organization, again, it's not necessarily information that hasn't already been introduced in health class. It's not necessarily a new subject. And with this system, however, it introduces, again, that anonymity, but then also with the process that we're envisioning, where if a name is placed into the beehive and the principal notifies the parents, it doesn't add on any extra liability. It doesn't necessarily give more responsibility to the school to do something about this. And so that's a really big thing.
Yeah.
We don't want to add more stress or, you know, create a bigger need for change within the school's individual systems. It's just this new system of handling this particular problem, but again, not
making the school responsible for further care. But I do think that once the schools discover how many of their students have mentioned that they're suicidal, are feeling suicidal, or have heard people talk about being suicidal, that they may realize this isn't just a problem of theirs. This is our problem too.
And with the surveys, that will provide instant feedback, which will then be supplied to the schools afterwards. And then whatever they choose to do with that information is, of course, their choice. But again, that's information they might not have gotten had this presentation not occurred.
In 2014, the CDC reported that 1 in 6 high schoolers reported feeling suicidal. In the 2015, it's 1 in 5. That's 20% of our students are seriously contemplating suicide now. It's 20% of our future population.